I'm going to talk about a couple of my worst deals on Lofty today, and then one of my best so far. Hey, it's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch making some money investing in fractional real estate online, as usual. Before we jump into the specifics of those deals, I want to talk a little bit about the time value of money. And I've talked all along about I'm experimenting on all of these different sites, right? That um, despite having a lot of real estate experience, and having that help me invest on a lot of these fractional real estate sites, um, the way to actually get the best outcome from each of the sites seems to be quite a bit different. And for me, on Lofty, because of the active trading and the ability and the rapid price movements, I believe that by far the way to get the most out of the platform is to be a relatively active trader. The reason being is, because of the time value of money. And if it's not a concept that you're really familiar with, all it is if I give you $100 today, or if I give you $100 10 years from now, if you had the choice between those two scenarios, you're going to pick the $100 today, right? Because there's a value to having it now. It's worth having that $100 today is worth more than if I promise to give you $100 10 years from now. So that's a whole concept. But there's a lot of math that you can use that's created based on that theory. You can do net present value calculations. You can do IRR. The one I use most often with the trading functions on, with my trading returns on here is XIRR, which just stands for extended IRR. And it's used most often when you have uneven cash flows at uneven time periods. Um, and it's a really great tool because the more you use XIRR, the more you realize um, the type of opportunity cost you have of not getting your money right away and having a chance to reinvesting it. Or in other words, you get to see the power of compounding in a much more real way than you do if you're just sort of throwing stuff into your IRR calculator or just looking at total returns, right? And so that's sort of, there's all kinds of stuff you can see online about this. I actually just had this up. I'm not going into this at all, but Investopedia has some pretty basic stuff about it. I really just wanted to have something up other than my Lofty page when I started talking about this concept. But so when I jump into some of these trades that I made, I just want to have this thought in mind, right? Time value of money, and it really sort of explains why I'm doing things the way that I'm doing them. Um, but so, okay, this is my first deal. I'm gonna start off bragging a little bit because this was a fantastic win, right? I sold out of Deneen completely today. Um, Waylick, who is a PM on the site and also just a whale in general, buying lots of tokens, had bought into this one, moved the price up to a point where I just felt like I had to sell out because not doing so, I'd just be giving up too much actual return, and especially annualized return. So I'll show you. I started buying these back in October. Only bought one at first. Well, actually, I say I only bought one. I actually bought four on that date, and they were the most expensive four I ever bought, I think. But they looked cheap at the time relative to everything else. I bought four and then sold three almost immediately, and so these were ones that I bought with what did I do? I bought with the on the market using the market order, but sold them with limit orders, I think. But bought four, but only sold three. Is that exactly true? I don't know. It might. I actually might have done a little bit better on this one because I think I might have actually bought with a limit order, not a market order. But I have the fees in here calculated as if I had done it. I'll have to go back and look. But anyway, I might have actually even made a better return than what I think here. But anyway, so it looked like I just bought one. I actually bought four, sold out of three. Um, and that's one of the things to keep in mind when I'm looking at my deals. Um, I'm always, whenever I sell, like we'll see some where I sold some of the tokens, not all. I'm always accounting for the first tokens that I bought are going to be the first ones that I sold. In accounting, they call that FIFO, first in, first out. Um, you can do it all sorts of different ways, but I think that it's a pretty appropriate way, and it's a good way if that's what you're doing. You're by getting rid of the oldest ones, you're always looking at the shortest time, the shortest hold period. One of the things though, like in instances like this, where okay, if I had only sold one today, I actually had a loss on that one, right? Like my average price on that first token is a loss, but based on what I sold them for. But over time, I averaged down quite a bit. So I started in October, and I had done it just because I could sell out right away to some that were profitable, but then didn't buy any until there was a big dip in March. Uh, Bought quite a few in March, and then a little bit in April, 10 more in April, and then didn't buy any. This is one that Whalek has tried to take over management for quite a few times, and it was rejected each time. And I don't know, it seemed like, um, I don't know that that really is what hurt the price. I actually don't know. It hasn't been yielding anything for quite a while. I think him taking over is a positive thing for the property. I only sold out because him buying into it made the price go up to a point where it made a lot of sense for me to sell. But I'm not actually sure what drove this price down from where it had been. Other than maybe, you know what, it's possible that it was just when they launched the liquidity pools. This might have been one that didn't have a liquidity pool and then it did. And so when it launched, they were actually much cheaper. I think that is what happened here, but I'm not even sure. I don't know why it was cheap. I might be able to go back. Hopefully, I did a video of when I was buying some of these. I at least did it for some of the what I bought this week videos. But anyway, accumulated them over a relatively short period of time, or most of them. Sold them all today. I sold about half with market orders, and then actually talked to Whalek in the Discord and sold some to him with a limit order, the other half. And that's one thing that's a huge benefit of being in the Discord is if you talk to people and you talk about, hey, I have these, I'm planning to sell them. Is anybody looking to buy them? Because the fees are so much lower on the limit orders and there's no slippage, it can sometimes be beneficial for both of us to do that, right? So he's not paying market order fees and getting the slippage that's driving it up too much. I'm not getting it that's driving it down. But anyway, made for, I think, a good deal for both of us, honestly. And I do think that, if you look at this property relative to the real world value, uh, I think there's still plenty of room for it to move up. But I'm selling because of this, right? So my total buy on these $1,050. My total sell $1,350. So my profit's a little over, and I'm obviously rounding when I'm talking, but my profit's right around $300. Uh, that's about 28.92% profit, right? That is net of all fees, and like I said, I think I actually threw a little bit too much fees in that first purchase, but regardless, um, it's a fantastic return, right? I mean, it's very hard to get a 28.92% return. But because it happened over such a short holding period, my annualized return there is almost 250%. I mean, it's an absurd amount of money. And so that's saying like if I can reinvest this right away and continue to make these same kind of deals, that I'd end up making a 250% return um, over the course of a year. Now, even though I've showed you several of these now where I've made fantastic XIRRs, I don't believe that's going to be my average. I think I believe, well over 30% is probably going to be what I'm making on here, but I don't think it's going to be in the, up in the, I've had a couple that are 90, I've had others that are 100. I've had, this one obviously, which is just absolutely absurd. Um, but it is possible to continually reinvest and, get very nice returns like this. Um, but for example, let's say I think that I could get another 10% increase in the price, or another 20% ROI if I held this for an additional year, right? Like let's say I hold it for a whole year and then I'll actually my absolute return would have been a 50% ROI versus 28. Well, my annualized return would still be lower, right? And so um, there's just a really strong benefit to cashing out and compounding this into something where I'm going to make a another similar return quickly, versus, which will lead to the higher return over time than if I just held on to it thinking, oh, I'm going to squeak a few more bucks out of this thing. And so that's something that you really have to play with math like this quite a bit before you realize just the power of, you know, by turning over money very quickly, um, you can just do so much better than if you're just turning it over slowly, provided you continually find deals to reinvest in. And that on average you're making these quick deals, right? So like for example, right now I have a whole bunch of money tied up in Odom. I think even though I think I would do well on that property, I don't think I'll do nearly as well as I have done on most of the other quick flips. I think in large part that's due to me being too big of a buyer into that property, and so I've sort of kept the price a little bit too high. And even though, we're about to put it on up for sale, and I think that I'll make a good profit if we sell it anywhere near the terms that I had suggested, it won't be one of these insane type returns, because my holding period is getting stretched out quite a bit longer. And I haven't had any opportunity to sort of trim or sell some off because I've always been the buyer that's been moving it up. There hasn't been another person pushing it up much past where I've been. So, um, that's I think it's one of the limitations on Lofty in general is you just have to be, my best deals have been where I've bought around between $1,000 and $3,000 worth of tokens. I think all the ones that I've pushed past that, and I've only had a couple so far, um, I end up just making the market too high with those purchases. And so, I think a couple of things it means I just have to be looking at more properties and more opportunities. But also, too, I think that at the moment, until Lofty has 10 times the amount of properties on here, I probably won't put a whole bunch more money on here. And I might even, depending on if money ends up sitting here, because I've cashed out of quite a few things lately. I took a little bit of cash off because I couldn't, I had like $3,000 sitting there that I couldn't figure out something else to put it in. And I knew I had a couple more that I was going to be selling and trimming soon. And so, I don't want to have cash just sitting here. I want to redeploy it somewhere. Um, so one of the things that I've thought about doing on Lofty is just having like, okay, because I can compound so well, but just with a small amount of money, only keeping so much on here, using it as sort of active trading dollars, and then just moving it into the platforms where I think are better long-term investments. And so for me right now, the number one site for that has been Mogul, which reminds me, okay, please like and subscribe. Um, in the description to this video, I have a link to all the other platforms where I'm currently investing on, Mogul, Ground Floor, uh, Lofty, Saul's Lot, Collab. Um, do your own due diligence on all of those because I don't like them all the same. I think, and just because I do or don't like one doesn't mean it's the right one for you. And also do your own due diligence on the individual properties on those platforms. I'm sure we have different risk tolerance. We have different holding periods. All these things are why you want to look into it on your own. Don't just take my word for it. And additionally, there's a link in the description to this video to a Discord where a whole bunch of us get together and talk about all these different platforms on a regular basis and some other platforms that I'm not invested in, but some other people are. So please feel free to check that out. Jump in there. We can talk about these deals or really anything that you want to that's related to fractional real estate. And then sometimes people just talk about ridiculous stuff in there too, and that's fine. Um, but yeah, so in general, I'm moving I think that my long-term dollars on these platforms at the moment, my favorite one is Ground Floor. I think that they just have deals that are fundamentally sound and I feel comfortable putting money into and just leaving it there and letting them do their thing. But I think that the place where I'm going to make the absolute best return by spending time uh, on the platform looking for deals is Lofty. But so far, it seems like if you deploy too much capital, you're just not going to make a huge return. And what's that number? Well, for me, I had about $60,000 on here. I've trimmed that down a little bit, and I probably, I think I put too much into Odom. So, I think if I spent more time digging, or if I was looking for some different deals, maybe I could put 100 on here and still get really good returns. But I think if you put, three or $400,000 on here, it's going to be really hard to get the types of returns that I'm talking about. Um, just because each time maybe you could do it if you really hustle making, limit orders and peer-to-peer trades. Um, but until Lofty starts to have a lot more opportunities on it, I think it's going to be difficult to put very much money to work and get these types of returns. And I think that that's, because of all of the flaws on Lofty, um, the only way I want to be on here is if I'm going to make ridiculous returns, right? I think that these are, fantastic risk adjusted returns, but I think there is a lot of risk built into this, and just like a lot of, well, okay, so let me go into the next deal. This is Coit. Let's see. Oh, there. This is one that was managed by Yom. I actually bought this knowing that, and knowing that there were votes to change it to a new manager. I have a buy limit, or I just sometimes messing around. Right, I've got a limit order to try to buy 5 of these for $1. I actually saw a sale go through that somebody did this somewhere else, so I figured I would try it out. Um, I don't know. I mean, this is just sort of an example of like how messed up Lofty is, right? I sold, well, was it? No, I didn't even talk about that one, but I sold some tokens today. Actually, no, this was Coit. So I sold these. Somebody had put a limit buy order for $20, even though the market price is still in the teens, right? And so I sold out of these. I mean, this was just 10 tokens. Um, but so when all that mess was going on, I bought 10 tokens in this one because it was super cheap. Just buying those 10 moved the price up. You can see, and with my fees, it's actually, if I sold today, I'd actually lose money, right? If I hadn't gotten that limit order. And so this is one, I only bought 10 tokens. It was almost 3 months ago. Um, it turned out, and I don't know if you remember, but when I did this, I talked about, unless there were a ton of bills that were, for a rehab that had racked up that we didn't know about, I thought I'd do okay on this. Well, it turns out there were a ton of bills for rehab on this property that we hadn't been told about, and it appears that work is still ongoing. And so this is one. It seems like I didn't really think I was going to make money on it. Maybe if I held on to this, um, maybe I'd do. Maybe I'd make money going forward. But it really wasn't clear anymore. So even though I thought I got a fantastic discount when I bought it, it clearly wasn't a deep enough discount, um, for the amount of just shenanigans that were going on with it, right? So, but somebody had put a limit buy order in there for, I don't know, 14 or something like that, or and I only had 10, so I sold mine, and it was for $20 a piece. Um, Only made $11.99 profit on this trade, which, is very low ROI, right? It's less than 7%. But because of how quick this deal was, this was still a 35% XIRR, meaning even if all of my deals were this bad, if I were able to just keep knocking them out quickly, I'd have very good returns on this platform. Now, this is one where I was wrong, right? And I think it's important. This is a mistake I see a lot of people make. They buy something like this, they realize it's worse than they thought, and their goal, and this happens to basically everybody who bought, at $50 the legacy portfolio, right? I mean, almost all of those are not the deal people thought they were. And instead of just, okay, let me get rid of it quick and try to get into the next deal and compound it, they're like, well, let me just hold on to this so I don't lose money, right? And I think that that's a big mistake because it might take years for it to come back and they get some sort of return in the future versus if you sell it now and then you flip it into the next deal and into the next deal and into the next deal, and you're getting returns closer to this versus this, or even if you're putting it in deals, even if you're getting a 35% XIRR, that's a fantastic annual return, right? I mean, that, like, if you can do that regularly, it wouldn't take very much to just rebuild an entire portfolio that's lost half its value, which I know a lot of people are sitting on. But that's not going to happen if you're just sitting there waiting for that property value to come back, right? And so as soon as I realized, okay, this was a mistake, I started paying attention to see when I can sell it. And I have a couple like this. Another one is Penhurst, right? I've been buying this one for quite a while, um, picking up little bits here and there. I didn't sell out entirely. This is one I just trimmed a little because the market order got high enough that I could trim and it was profitable, but not hugely profitable. So this is a property I've been buying since all the way back in October. It's one that's been listed for sale, I think, that whole time. And it's one that I was wrong about the real world price. And it's because we were not being told the actual condition of the property. So we had an agent that had it listed, and he was telling us, oh, we should be able to get 70 or we should be able to get, 65. And we kept moving the price down. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, well, I think you'll probably only get 35 for it, even though he had told us to reject offers earlier. And so I actually asked a different agent to go take a look at it, and it turned out like there was a roof leak, and I mean, the property's just trashed. And so we weren't going to get that price that I was buying into it thinking we were going to get. Um, we switched to this new agent. I think we're going to get a sale. If it doesn't happen with the current buyer, I think that we will get one. But it's not going to look like what I thought, when I was originally buying. A lot of those early tokens were some of my most expensive tokens too, right? Remember, I'm selling out the oldest ones first when I'm doing my math. And so again, on this one, I made very little profit, right? I bought for 309, sold for 339, made right around $30 profit. It's about, less than a 10% ROI. And because these were ones that I held on to for a long time, my XIRR is only 17. And, I say it is kind of weird because to say only 17, it's still a fantastic return when you compare it to most things in the world that you can invest in. But on this platform, I just am expecting to do much better because so far I've been able to, but also because I believe that some of my money that's in properties right now is probably going to be trapped there, and some of it's going to be a loss. And it's going to be because of things like this where there's huge bills that we didn't know about, or we had the property listed for sale, but it seems like maybe the agent hadn't been to the property for months and didn't realize how bad off it was, or for whatever reason, we weren't getting the full story, right? And so, because I think both of these I got pretty lucky to get out and it is profitable, I'm sure there'll be ones that like the Universal Lending DAO, I have some money in there. Uh, Seems like unless Lofty, comes up with some good solution where maybe they're kicking in some money or they're clawing back money from somebody else or whatever they're planning to do with it, which they still haven't made their plans clear. Unless they do something pretty favorable for us investors in there, I think I'll probably lose money on that one. I've held off on just liquidating and getting into the next one because I think they keep saying, oh, we're going to do something, and I want to hear what that something is. And I think that it's some of those loans are made to Yom, former Yom managed properties. And so I think it's probably tied up in that, why we don't have a solution yet. Um, but regardless, that's one that I have. That's probably my biggest chunk of money that's kind of stuck. That in Odom, I think will be a decent return, but it's not going to be a 249% XIRR. It's probably not even going to be a 35, right? And so, um, and that's one where, we got some initial pricing on it as what it was going to be able to sell for it. And then it turns out, oh, we're definitely not going to sell for anywhere close to that. I think that the nature of this platform, because we don't have, boots on the ground, local people that are investing with us that are checking on these properties. At least for the most part, we don't. I think that it's just that setup. We're going to have a lot of these big negative surprises, and because of that, um, that's one of the reasons why I haven't put a whole bunch of money on this platform. For one, it's one of the reasons I don't think that it is a good idea. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think we have a lot of great options for long-term holds on here. But it's also, the reason that I think there's just these unbelievable opportunities for like quick little trades. Something's, selling for much less than it should be because the general impression is that it's worse than it is, or I mean, like for Deneen, even where it's selling today, this property seems like it shouldn't be selling as cheap as it is, right? Like I think that I think people are missing this one, but especially when I was buying it in the teens, uh, I mean, this was just absolutely absurd that it was selling for that cheap, right? And so, um, those sorts of opportunities, I think you have to take advantage of. And when you do, you know, yes, I think that if I held it, I might be able to get a decent return on it going forward, but it's not going to look anything like, most of the money was made when I bought this at a discount, right? Like it's not that it's a bad investment going forward, but the actual money is made in real estate when you buy. Like people always say that, right? When you make money when you buy, and they mean the discount that you negotiate, or you're buying it with a specific business plan in mind that makes it more valuable to you than it is to the market. Um, those things are true in real estate in real life, but it's not always. I think that gets sort of lost on people um, over time because they then they hold it for the long term, and so they sort of miss out on compounding it. It's one of the reasons in real life a lot of the real estate that I've owned for very short periods of time relative to most other investors that I know. Um, but on here, you know, uh, when I bought these $14 tokens, and this is including all fees, right? When I bought those, uh, that's when I made the money on this because this was worth more than this that day, right? It's just that the market for tokens was mispricing the market for the property in real life. And so as soon as that's fixed, right, as soon as there's the ability to make some money selling that, I'm just going to do it. And sure, could I hold out and try to get a 50% ROI? Yes, but it might take so long that my actual annualized return is lower by trying to do that. And so that's why I'm just trying to move some of this stuff really quickly. As soon as I realize I've made a mistake on something, I'm trying to get rid of it. Um, I do still have some more of these Penhurst ones. I think that if we negotiate a deal anywhere close to what we're trying to do, I think that well, I know I'll be perfectly fine and I'll be beating this return. But one of the things that I did with this sale is I sold some of my most expensive tokens that I had, and also some of the ones that I've held the longest, right? And so by doing that, my return on the ones that I'm continuing to hold will be a better annualized return because I've held them for less time, and also just be a better return in general because they're the cheaper tokens that I've bought, right? And so over time, I've just wanted to buy cheaper and cheaper tokens in this property um, because I figured out that the actual condition of it was significantly worse than what had been represented to us, leading up to that point in time. And so that's really all I want to talk about. I've shared quite a few of these where I've got done really well. I wanted to share a couple that did not go as well, although honestly, I mean, these aren't great examples because they're not losses. I will definitely have losses to show you at some point. I think it is hard to really lose money because something like that, what happened with Coit has to happen, right? Like there has to be this un you know this these unpaid bills that we don't know about, or this work that was done, or some huge problem, because other than that, like if I'm just buying at a real discount to the real world value, if I hold it long enough, I should do okay. But some of these, if it looks like I'm going to get stuck in a longer term hold, I will just start trimming, and that's really what I'm just doing here, right? Because it looks like we're going to sell Penhurst and be holding the mortgage, and we'll the IRR on the transaction that we're trying to put together there, I'm perfectly happy with it based on what I have into it. But if I can, if I can get out a little bit, get rid of some of my oldest tokens and some of my most expensive ones, that deal will look even better for me going forward. And this wasn't terrible, right? And by getting out of it now, um, it makes that future transaction actually more attractive. And I did okay on this because I'm going to be able to reinvest the money that I pulled out of this one already. And so that's one of that's why I wanted to start off really hitting the point of time value of money because the quicker that you can admit you've made a mistake, the quicker you can, or that things are just not going to work out the way you originally thought, the quicker you can take that money, and compound it somewhere else where you're going to do better. Because it'd be real easy to just hold on to, especially quite like, it'd be really easy to just hold on to this, um, for 2 or 3 years and be like, oh, well, we're gonna, okay, so what? We do owe $50,000 or whatever it is, but but it will eventually do well with it, right? But it's much better that, okay, I sold now, I got a little bit of extra money, and let me put this in a deal that's going to look more like this deal than it does, like this, this one here, right? That's my whole goal. I know I've talked about this in a bunch of different ways, but I really think that um, it still seems like this concept is lost on people, right? Like people think real estate is a long-term investment. I'm investing in real estate on Lofty. I have to look at this as a long-term investment. And I think that for some of the deals, it makes sense, right? Some of the deals are good deals, and I think if you put your money in there and you just wait, you'll do perfectly fine. You won't do 240 XIRR fine, but you'll do fine, for relative to most of the other investment options in the world. But I think that if you are buying ones that you're looking to hold long term, and then it turns out that that deal is not what you thought, um, it doesn't make sense to then, the longer you hold it, holding out for hoping something's going to change, the more you're giving up the opportunity cost of getting into deals where you're actually going to make money. Because if you make money on your buy, you want to be able to buy as often as possible. And the only way to do that is to also sell, right? And so I guess that's the, sort of the point. The quicker you're able to turn these over, the quicker you can get that compound return, um, that you're just not really getting on deals where you've made your money by buying that discount. I think I've said that like 17 ways at least, and so that's all I'm going to say. Tickle the like button if you haven't already. Um, do the thing with the bell. Jump in the Discord. Let me know if this makes sense to you, right? Like, I know I get a lot of pushback, mostly in DMs. I think a lot of people, feel free to criticize me openly on there. I really don't mind and I can take it. The reason I wanted a separate Discord was so that we could, criticize all of the platforms and not feel like we're going to get attacked by super fans of the platforms, like what happens when you are on some of their some of the platforms that are set up, the discords that are set up by the, like Lofty's Discord. Landa's was like that a long time ago, but now I don't think anybody likes them anymore. But like some of them that have their own one set up, it's really all super fans on there. I wanted a place where we could like compare them, recommend other ones to each other, and speak badly of them and not worry about hurting our relationship with the people that work there or whatever it is. I'm just having sort of a more neutral place. So in the spirit of that, also if I'm saying things that you just think are stupid, jump right in there and tell me where I'm messing up and what you think differently, because obviously I'm trying to share my real estate experience, but this is new to me, right? Like I'm actually having to draw on a lot of my finance education that never really went to work in the real estate space, or not nearly as much. I mean, I worked in REITs a little bit, and so, there's some of this stuff came up, um, but not nearly as much as like if you're most of real estate finance is looking at deals on longer term holds, except for like development deals and whatnot. Um, But, so a lot of this stuff is not, it's new to me too, right? And so I can certainly be looking at things in a way that's not going to work out. And I'd love it if somebody would point that out whenever that does happen. Um, all right, now I think I'm really done. Until next time. And so, see, I do make some mistakes, right? Like I'm going to try to share those as much as possible. And so, until next time, I'm going to keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.